Just get started, I guess.
Rubber baby buggy bunkers. No, rubber baby buggy bumpers. Apparently that's
a warm-up, a podcast warm-up.
Yeah, and there's other things here.
Okay.
Rubber baby buggy bumpers.
Okay, guys, let's go.
Wing It Podcast, goosedigital.com, episode 42. Who do we have?
Robin Kroll.
Jen Pugsley.
Chris O'Neill.
Michael Turksani. Welcome, everyone.
Morning.
Oh, hi.
Morning. Bright and early, 7 a.m. Eastern. So this is an early one for everyone. This is how we do it over here. Right, Chris?
How do we do it, Mike? I have no idea. How do we get up this early? And
you got to get up. You got to drag yourself out of bed. We're talking about data, and why
Every
and
day.
how, and all sorts of good stuff around it. Now we're talking about your data because we have been in many conversations lately, especially after this COVID time, or during this COVID time, when a lot of companies are trying to leverage the data that they have on their customers, and it's getting in the way of actually leveraging or of launching a variety of initiatives. So these are the conversations that we're having with new prospects that want to launch marketing automation initiatives and are finding that they can't do it because they're getting held up. So why don't we talk a little bit about that piece there? What are we seeing on the front lines? I'll turn to Chris first, then we'll go to Robin on why, and some of the common metrics. Maybe Jen can fill in some of that. So go ahead, Chris.
All right, thanks, Mike. So what we are hearing is that there's a definite interest in selling to the existing base. So that is customers with whom an insurance broker has business and they want to sell something else. Obviously, there's a lot of products that, we see a lot of brokerages and P&C getting into life, getting into, other areas, and they want to, and it's a good idea.
Mortgage insurance add-ons.
Mortgage insurance, taking a new product to their existing base, which makes total sense, and we're in total support of that. But in some instances, there's an awareness that the data might not be ready to go, and that is because in the effort to kind of get a new deal into the system, maybe all the questions weren't asked. Maybe there's like a lack of key information in order to market into those folks. And one of the obvious ones would be email, because when you're reaching out to your existing base, email is as we talked about last podcast, email is a very important portion of that effort. So in some cases, a broker principal will say, I've got a data problem. And that is a great place to start, because when there isn't the impression, and as Mike said before, there's something holding them back. Maybe the impression is that the fact that I've only got 40 or 50% of my existing customers with an email address in the system, in the BMS, it's like that's stopping me. Well, like we'll talk about how it is that doesn't necessarily have to stop you. It's something that needs to be addressed. But in other instances, that information does not become sort of part of the conversation. In other words, there's a little bit of a reluctance, maybe almost a little bit of embarrassment over the fact that there isn't all the data that I believe I need to kind of reach out to my existing base. That's another issue. That's another sort of opportunity to uncover and sort of discuss how it is that we go about getting that data in ready to go. So, I would say that with respect to cross sells and upselling existing customers, this is one of the things that we're running into pretty regularly, is that that portion of what is your existing data like? is there any portion of it that's ready to go? And how can we help to get you into a better position to be able to take advantage of the relationship that you've built with your customers over the, 10, 15, 20 years of sort of building your customer base?
So Robin, you want to chip in? Robin, Jen, you want to chip on sort of what we're seeing and kind of why this is important to have your data in order?
Sure. So first of all, I just want to say that there isn't a single company, regardless of which industry you look at, that has perfect data. It just doesn't exist, right? Data is always a work in progress. Are there some companies or some industries that have their data in better shape than others? Yes. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, these organizations are the ones that actually understand the importance of data. So they actually spend some time looking at their data. So understanding what data they have available and looking where the gaps are, where the cleanup has to happen, and they put together a process. These are also organizations that say, even if my data is only 40 or 50% ready to go, so that might mean, to Chris's point, I only have 40% of the emails from my customers, or only 40% of my data is actually clean. These are organizations that say, this is not going to stop me. I'm going to use the data carefully, but I'm going to start putting that data into practice. Because as you start using your data and you start putting together that cleanup process, you are going to be able to move from that 40% gradually to 60%, 80% till you get to that completion. And as you're putting that data into action, not only are you having that cleanup process, but you're actually moving your marketing forward. You're learning more about your customers, which in some cases you're actually capturing additional data points, which is then going ahead and helping you backfill your missing data. It's also helping you clean up the data, and it's helping you be more targeted, more relevant, and more successful with your marketing. So these are all reasons of why it's important to start somewhere, put together a plan, and move forward. And for a lot of organizations, specifically in the insurance industry, that whole concept can seem very daunting because it is a project. It's not necessarily an area where someone, a broker principal might have expertise in. And that's why it's really important to work with a partner who does have that expertise, specifically in the data area, to help move forward. And if you read any of the insurance industry newsletters or blogs that are out there, every second one will talk about the importance of data for segmenting, for personalization, for relevance. So it's really important for so many reasons to get started with your data plan.
Yeah, I agree. What you said there, Robin, at the beginning is that it's not really, large companies in this industry have the same problem. So it's not just, your mid or your small broker or your large broker. It's also, big carriers that have the same problem as well. So, and I think there's a difference between personalization and being able to execute. Right. So it's really, everybody wants their communications to be highly personalized and bringing in all these data points. And that's what you should strive to, but that's not necessarily what you need on day one to get something out the door that's still very valuable.
Mm-hmm. So maybe we can talk about kind of assessing the data next, because that's a good point on striving for personalization. I think until and when we do this in terms of looking at a particular campaign, or, sometimes we refer to these things as use cases, which might be a very specific type of cross-sell. I mean, essentially they're campaigns or initiatives that the business wants to achieve. As you said, Chris, they ultimately want to go out and try to address their audience, either for growth or for communication purposes, for renewal, for referral, whatever that happens to be. That's a business initiative, and then it kind of gets handed off to marketing or IT to say, okay, how do we go do that? And then they come back with, well, the data is kind of all over the place. And so at first, how can we talk about assessing the data? Maybe let's talk about assessment first. Maybe we can go to Robin and then around kind of in the reverse order, go Jen and Chris. And then you can weave in prep if you want, or we can somebody can touch on preparation.
Sure. So if we talk about assessment, it's important to look at it in the lens of you're marketing at the same time. So you might have, 50 different fields of data, but when you want to start off with your assessment, you want to look at what is some baseline data that I need to understand, the quality and the quantity of my data to be able to even embark on this marketing. And so that's when you'll identify those key fields. And when you look at assessment, I always look at it at two different levels. One, a penetration level. So, do I actually have data for a particular field? So for example, email address. One of the first steps is, do I have 40% of my customers with an email? Do I have 50? Do I have 60? So that would be the first level of assessment. And the second level would be, is that actually good data? And now some data points you can do that level of assessment, others you can't. Email is one of those things that you can, because there are the basic ways that an email is constructed, from having the @ symbol to having a recognized domain name is the first level, and then using sources to go ahead and verify, is this actually a valid email address? So those are fairly straightforward ways to get started on doing a base level of assessment. And some of the basic fields, email address, or first name, last name, a mailing address, those are some of the things that you can start with the assessment, and that's enough to get you started. And when you go to more, more user-defined fields, which might be a title, or maybe a company or an industry, those might be further along the lines for your assessment, but there are still ways to understand the quantity and then the quality of the data, and that's a great way to get started with your assessment.
Jen?
Yeah, and I think
Assessment/prep.
Yeah, /prep. I think, it is helpful to tie back to a use case in some areas. Sometimes that brings clarity to what you're trying to assess. So if you really want to do a monoline auto kind of a campaign, then you're obviously going to take everything that Robin talked about in her assessment, and then you're going to start layering it with, policy type, effective date, and those kinds of things. I think
maybe the insurance market.
Yeah, you're gonna want the carrier type. You'll want to take a look at those suppression, what you would want to suppress in some of these campaigns. So a lot of times we'll suppress like a VIP segment because that kind of makes everybody a little bit nervous. So those are kind of some of the layers you can start really thinking about
recently
when you're
sold customers. You might want to suppress people that have only been a client for 2 years.
Yeah. So all this in the assessment, and if you don't have these planning documents, again, it goes back to working with a partner that knows how to kind of work through these weeds with you. But there's oftentimes these brokers have actually any company has far more data that they can use than they realize.
So Chris, maybe in terms of where you take this, I mean, I think the assessment and prep, really what we're saying is that from a business perspective, and when you're having these conversations, what we're seeing is a lot of reservation about kind of some of the data that exists and how to navigate around that. And maybe you could talk about with some of the ways that a provider like Goose can really help assess and prep the data for some level of campaigning, what are the types of questions that a business, the broker principals or the executive teams should really be thinking about?
Yeah, good. So like the first part of it is generally around, let's not get into the weeds about what it is that you've got in terms of data. Let's start with what your overall strategy for growth is. So
Mhm.
let's say, for example, you're talking to somebody who sees an opportunity of growth in a particular product because they know like insurance broker principals know their customer base at a very, very high level. They know who they are. They know the insurance business, so they know what products are available. So that's all you need to know. What is the product? And then you know your customers well enough to know, okay, that is there. That's where the discussion starts. So it's around, Mike, the strategy of growth. What is
Mm-hmm.
going to get me the growth that's going to, and that's all a principal needs to focus on, because all of the other details, we can work all that stuff out. So that's where I think the major focus with a broker principal is how are you going to grow your business to where it is that you want to go? That is, what are the products? What are the services? What is it like? How is it that you're going to get that growth that you're looking for? If you're not looking to grow, if you're looking to be, sort of you have some other strategy, that's fine and dandy. But if you want to grow, then you're going to need to kind of decide, how is it, what products, what area. We talk to a lot of customers who are like, we've got a lot of business on the personal side. We like it, but we'd like to grow our commercial. Great. That's a great place to start, because we can help sort of get that sort of process started, understanding, helping to understand where it is that you're going into that new area of business. But this is sort of the place where the conversation really starts. And I would avoid sort of getting into the weeds of, what is it that we actually like, how is it that we're actually going to do that? The first step is, what is it that you want to, how is it you
Yeah.
want to grow?
So
Okay.
if you keep it, and I like that. I mean, I think that's really what we're saying is that, and this leads into like, it's okay to go to a portion, and we can maybe start with Jen and then go around Chris and Robin on that. And then we're going to talk about building up your data. But I think if you keep it to the business objectives and the strategy to say, we are trying to execute this, I think where you'll end up in all likelihood, and exactly like you'd said, Robin, is that you may only be able to address, let's say in a perfect world, you have 1,000 policyholders that meet the criteria for a campaign. You may only be able to go out to 400 of them. And that's okay. So I want to talk about that next, maybe go with Jen, is that, that's a great place to start and prove out the model. So Jen, why don't we talk about, it's okay to go to a portion of your data, and how would you do that if you had a capable system?
Yeah, so I would definitely start with a subset of, whether that's one use case or whether that's to try to test something out, even if it's, you go back to that cross-sell use case, or, critical bulletins if it's customer marketing and has nothing to really do with growth at this point. Having a system like an Acton or a Pardot or a HubSpot is going to allow you to do several different layers of segmentation. So I would say it's pretty impossible to, I guess you can try to do it with some of those other smaller email platforms, but the segmentation is really where it's going to come into play. So taking a list of like that 500, seeing how it works, segmenting by any different way, whether it's region, whether it's, we're just going to go out to a postal code in this area, set up your KPIs to see how it's going to perform, and set it out, send it out. I think there's also this concept of like personalization, in the sense of like, you don't want something to just be bogus. And this is where sending it out to a subset is really going to save your butt, if you will, like it just, testing things out. But there's also this thing where we usually do is this fail safe messaging. Okay. So this is where the messaging inside these communications play a really big part, because you can really angle anything you want to come across the way you want it to within messaging or subject title, to so you don't look like the idiot that just sent something out that should have not, maybe hit the wrong guy, right? A perfect example of that is bundling communications, right? So if you're doing a segment where in this segment, we build out the segment in the platform, we know we're going to get 90% of the audience that has auto, that doesn't have property, but there's this 3% over here, 10% over here that may get it because of their policy type and the data is not absolutely perfect. We have a fail-safe communication or messaging in there that says, hi Jen, if you're already bundling with us, then you're doing awesome. Nobody gets fussed, and feel free to review with us if you have additional questions, right? So it's kind of how you position the communication, and then seeing in the system once this thing's been deployed, and the open rates and the response rates when your customers are actually responding back to this communication to say, actually, yeah, I'd love to talk to you. Then you can start to prove that, okay, that one went well, or we would change this next time.
Awesome. Good points. So
So
Robin, going to a portion.
Pardon?
Go ahead. Yeah, no, I was going to say going to a portion.
Yeah, so so I was just saying, going back to what Chris said about starting with a strategy, and then, Jen, and that strategy then follows on to say, this is our testing phase, right? So we're testing with that 40% of our customers where we do have the email addresses. We can go ahead and market to those customers. And then the reporting that goes with that, because that's going to be really important. As you are testing to a portion, you want to be able to see those results. And, just going back to something I said earlier, as you're seeing those results, there are additional data points that are coming in, your opens, your clicks, and being able to look at that segment maybe by geography. So all these additional things that you're actually learning about your customers and how they're engaging, so that even though you are just marketing to a small portion, there's a lot of learning and insights, and that's going to help take you to that next step. And that next step might be, do we want to expand that same portion? So maybe there's additional steps we have to do to get some additional data, or maybe there's a different campaign for another portion of customers that we want to go ahead and test out. And as you're doing these different segments or portions, as we're calling them, you are gradually marketing into your base. You're using your data, you're adding to your data source, and you're moving your marketing forward.
Well, and and I think, Robin, it's so interesting to me because a lot of producers and CSRs, they're doing a lot of this type of, it's just email. You can strip it down and make it look like it was hand typed from John in the office, or you can make it as marketing flashy as you want to. So it's really not that the CSR or the producer isn't maybe sending that, hey, are you interested in a cross?
It's just a lot of work.
And
that's where I wanted to talk about, that's where I wanted to actually dovetail into maybe Chris to comment on this briefly, and then we'll get into building up the data, is that I want to discuss this concept of creaming off the top. We talked about this yesterday with a broker, Chris, that the audience, you're never going to have 100% likely. You're going to have people in your base that, don't want to have an email address or don't want to receive marketing communications, or that you've come up with a program that is just very, very challenging to fully get everybody to buy in digitally. But that creaming off the top and then being able to prioritize your sales resources. So you talk about that for a bit?
There's a reluctance, I think, Mike, to like do something, like to sort of try something for a number of reasons. One is that the fear is that, and again, because these systems have come so far in the last couple of years, even if someone tried to do an email campaign, even like 5 or 10 years ago, it's like, that's not the world we live in now. And you don't have to, hire an army in order to, get stuff done, get stuff done out there. So that's one aspect of it, is like sort of that reluctance of what am I getting myself into. Second thing though is the creaming off the top is basically you've got you've got customers who know you very well, you do have their email address, and you can send them a very personalized message. So why not? Why not do that? The cream are those guys that are basically ready to buy from you. And they're there, they're already in your database. You don't have the emails of everybody, but you've got the emails and you've got that sort of population of customers that are going to buy from you. So why not sell to them? And the fact that the systems now allow you to do it without having to hire a bunch of new people to kind of make that happen, it's just basically waiting for you. So I think that's kind of like the starting point. Once we get that sort of cream off the top, it's like the lights start going off as to, oh, what does that mean if I actually, like, maybe there's more cream in here, but I just need to be able to sort of, hive into that a little bit more, hive into my my existing base in order to get that.
And that's where it becomes omni-channel. And I think that's where you were going, Jen, is that they are doing this today in some capacity, likely. They're probably very nervous about rolling these initiatives out to their current team because it's hitting phone calls, or it's one more thing now I need to talk to you about at renewal. And well, that's not necessarily, it's the time that we're already calling or doing something. So we tend to do it then. We tend to do these things then, but it's not the optimal time. So to your point, Chris, the creaming off the top actually helps optimize that other process that is still going to need to be the case. You're not going to get, even if you had 100% of everything, you won't get 100% cream off the top. And your digital strategy will be a combination, will help inform your kind of offline strategy. So if we can get 20 or 30% responders within a solid base to cream off, then that helps us say, well, great, now we don't have to call everyone, or we don't have to approach it the exact same way for everybody else, and slowly develop that. And you'll hit a peak at some point where you just can't get past it. You've got a certain amount of digital customers, digital type responders in your base, and maybe over the years it grows, slowly. But it's getting to that place where it's okay for people for the brokers, for people in this industry to have a portion of their audience respond to these things. And as long as that portion and the slice and dice and all these mechanics adds enough value back with what you're putting in, because you don't have to spend an army on it. You have to spend something, but you don't have to spend an army on it. Then it's well worth the investment. And likely it's not going to cost you even a full-time person all in with technology and everything to actually execute a year's worth of this stuff and get some return on it. So why don't we talk, and I know we're at probably close to 30, so we don't want to take too long on this. So everybody gets about 15 seconds. No, I'm just kidding. Everybody gets about a minute. Let's talk about building up. So, okay, great. I do want more email addresses. Let's start with that one, because I think that one is a common one. There's other data points, and I think there's a bit of a process component that maybe someone can touch on, making sure from the beginning this stuff is captured. Let's talk about how to build it up. So let's go with Robin first.
Right, so email addresses, you're right, it's a priority because that is the baseline to execute. So if you have 40% email addresses, what are some other things you can do? Look at other contact points that you have for that existing customer, your existing customer base, and put together an email capture strategy. Do you have cell phones? Can you build out a text-based campaign where you're reaching out, asking customers for their email address, driving them to a landing page, so it's a very straightforward, simplified process? Do you have mailing addresses? Can you then do a direct mail campaign where you're sending something to your customer, they get it in the mail? Again, there's also a link for a landing page capturing the addresses. So those are two quick things that you can go ahead and do to jump from that 40 to 60% for your emails.
Jen?
Yep, and all those points, and I also agree, or get your team involved. These brokers, CSRs, are all on the phones all day long. It takes 2 seconds to ask the customer for an email address.
Chris, can you touch on maybe briefly, well, they're worried about getting, spammed.
So they're worried about being perceived as being spamming.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the main point there is that the systems that we are using are fully protected against that kind of perception. So I know that there's been a lot over the past number of years of being sort of black marked or whatever in the systems for like sending emails that are not being opened. There's all kinds of technology that maybe there's like a misunderstanding about that aspect. So a professional team like Goose Digital can basically ensure through the systems that we deploy that you're not going to, that's not an issue that you have to be concerned with.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that, one of the things we touched on last podcast, and we'll wrap it up here, and if anybody needs to chime in a final point, but, we talked about, in 2020, a lot of the consumers are being trained around a certain type of expectation. They do hear from these retailers in a variety of different ways, and they hear from other service providers, from your vehicle, service. There's a lot of companies that are starting to wrap in more strategic communication programs around the service that they provide. And I think there's another lens around that they're worried that their insureds will feel like they're about to get spammed. And I think that that's okay. I think what we're talking about is the people that are going to opt in and want to hear from let's just use the broker lens for a minute, from their broker, are going to be happy to have that happen. And if you end up hitting them 8 times a month with all kinds of stuff that doesn't make sense, and you've thrown them into a batch and blast because you don't have the data side of it nailed down, and you don't have a platform that lets you tightly segment and do testing and ease your way into it, and of course then measure the impact on your base out the other end. If you're just very much going into it, well, we think this is this and it's going to work, and then you do run a risk of being perceived by your audience as opportunistic and just constantly quote unquote spamming them. But I think the platforms that do it well have a preference center. If you go to opt out, it takes you to a place where, oh well, I'm happy to receive new offers related to my policies, but I don't really want to know about local events in my region, or I don't really care to know about tips about how, tips pertaining to my usage of my policy type. I don't really care about that stuff. So they give them choices of where they can then go. And that's really important too. So I think that all of this is to say that, beyond just the thought process of a business initiative, there's a variety of steps you can take to really see this successful on the back end. If there's anything else, I think it's a good spot to wrap up. Does anybody want to chime in? Robin,
I was just going to add one last point, that one of the things that we've seen over COVID is that segments of customers who prior to the pandemic were not that comfortable receiving information digitally or through email, that segment has really changed. And for a large part, they have become more comfortable, and they have that increased expectation that they will be receiving communication, even from their insurance broker, via email. And this is a great opportunity for the insurance industry to capitalize that and use that for both the benefit of their customers and their own benefit as well.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. This was great. We'll come up with a catchy title, something to do with dirty data. We don't know yet. All right.
Okay.
Peace.
Stay safe.